Hello, welcome back. Now, get this. If we don't go hell for leather with climate change, we're basically going to be broke. It's going to impoverish us. You, me, your nan, your granddad. Well, actually, they'll probably be dead because we're talking about by 2050. This is according to Emma Pinchbeck. Now, she is the chief executive of the Climate Change Committee. So it's kind of her job to tell us all that unless we do net zero, it's going to be a really bad situation. But let's have a read of how she details this. She says that drivers of petrol cars would see driving costs £700 a year higher than electric car owners in 2050. Emma, mate, the government's put a ban on making new petrol vehicles after 2030. So what are these things that people are still driving around with petrol in 2050? Cars don't last that long. A 20-year-old car. I mean, back in the day, they might have sort of struggled through to another era, but not anymore, mate. So that's already debunked. That's stupid. She also said a household with a fossil fuel boiler in 2050 instead of a heat pump would face energy bills of £750 a year higher. Again, by 2050. But also, that's if there's no fuel or no gas and we're not getting oil out and we're not getting gas out. You know, these are all conditional things. And also 2050, in 25 years' time, she's got out a crystal ball and she says the energy bill's going to be 750 quid a year higher. Oh, what, you know what OPEC's doing, do you? You know that in 20 years' time, OPEC's going to really cut barrel supply, that, you know, the drill baby drill that Donald Trump's introduced in 5 presidents' time is going to go like, yeah, no, we're not doing that anymore. I mean, who knows? Where are you getting your maths from, woman? It is her job to tell us this stuff. But what we know is it's all very well saying by 2050, life will be a lot cheaper after the Green Revolution. It ain't a lot cheaper now, sunshine. We know how much it's costing us. We've got the highest energy bills in the world. Let's speak to Rupert Darwall now, author of Green Tyranny. Rupert, great to have you on the programme. I mean, we're always told jam tomorrow, aren't we? We're told the climate crisis is now. And if we don't do stuff now, we're in huge trouble. And yet we've been told this by people like Al Gore 10 years ago, that 5 years ago the world was literally going to have imploded and it didn't happen. Then we're being told that if we don't do this, we're going to be broke in, what, like 25 years' time. But actually we're impoverished now. That's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Alex. It's all jam tomorrow. Actually, it's not even tomorrow, is it? It's in 2.5 decades' time, which, you know, kind of gives you a feel for where they're coming from. As things stand, energy bills are just going to go up and up and up as we continue to go to net zero.
Well, exactly. And a lot of people sitting out there right now care about the here and now, because you can't say, well, you know, you're going to be really impoverished now. You're going to freeze to death in your home. You're not even going to be alive in 2050 if you're a pensioner whose winter fuel allowance has been taken away. You're not, you know, if you can't afford to go and buy stuff now, or, you know, you can't get a job because there's no manufacturing in this country because the cost of energy is sky high, some of the highest in the world, then the idea that somehow in 2050 that's going to be okay is immaterial.
But anyhow, Alex, the fact is that the more you go from gas and fossil fuels to electricity, particularly for heating, the higher bills will go up. And it's to give you an illustration, but what Emma Pinchbeck and the CCC, the Climate Change Committee, ignore the infrastructure costs. So National Grid is going to be spending nearly £60 billion on more pylons and so forth, whereas the gas that comes through the gas pipelines to your home, that's in the books at £6.6 billion. So we've already got the infrastructure to heat our homes, and she wants just to write that off and spend 10 times as much as what was already been invested on electricity. That is why bills will go up.
But also, it seems to me that all of her projections hinge upon what other people are going to be doing in 2050, because what affects the cost of gas and oil is whether or not Saudi wants to drill it, whether or not America's drilling it, whether or not Russia's able to sell it without sanctions, etc. It's got blimmin' naff all to do with what we do in this country when we produce less than a percentage of emissions. And frankly, I don't even know what the percentage of population we contribute to the global population is, but it's probably far, far less. So the idea that you can look into the future and project all of these things, and that the UK alone must shoulder the burden when China doesn't bother doing their part, America's not going to be doing their part. And by 2050, according to all these climate alarmists, we're probably not even going to have a planet Earth anyway.
Well, what Emma Pinchbeck and the CCC should do is look at what BP has done just this week, which is they've said we're canning our renewable stuff. They're really cutting back on renewables, and they're saying we're actually an oil and gas company. There is a big future in oil and gas, and we're going to invest more in developing our oil and gas business. That is the future that the CCC is not telling us about.
And this is the thing, though. There are plenty of people out there who do buy into, and I don't know, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I actually don't know. I've never pretended to be a climate scientist. I kind of think if there's everybody out there saying there's climate change and is man-made, then it's kind of like a huge conspiracy to get all these people to be lying, but perhaps they are. But again, I don't know. What I do know is it seems totally unaffordable, and what I do know is that whatever we decide to do in Britain is not going to move the needle, is it? It can't. I mean, that's just logical.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the fact is the global south are going to carbonize. They're going to carry on developing their economies with oil and gas, and in particular coal. I mean, the biggest consumer, the biggest burner of coal is China, and it will continue to be the world's largest consumer of coal.
So really, if we wanted to do net zero properly, what we would do is put some sort of embargo against stuff being imported from China, and actually, rather than try and self-flagellate at the altar of net zero ourselves, make it part of any sort of trade relationship with a third country by saying, well, you burn coal, we're not allowed to, so our people aren't allowed to buy your goods that are undercutting our economy.
Well, that's kind of where we're heading. It's called carbon border adjustment mechanism. The EU's doing that, and Britain will follow doing that. What that does, of course, Alex, is it makes life more expensive at home. But what it also doesn't do is it doesn't help exporters. Basically, you have lost your export markets because your energy is more expensive, which is why the German economy is in such big danger. It is on its back because basically higher energy costs, thanks to renewables and net zero, are basically putting German exporters out of business.
No, indeed, and you're right. Actually, this is the thing. If you suddenly say we're not going to have a load of, cheap products from China, it is the consumer in the end who's going to have to pay a lot more money for those products, and it will add to the cost of living crisis. I mean, what is the best way out of this? Do we just bin net zero altogether and go, forget it, it's not worked, no one's buying into it, and we're going to take a gamble when it comes to the future of the planet?
I think the first thing is that, Alex, is we need some honesty, and we ought to, and the Climate Change Committee and the people in favour of net zero need to level with people and say, look, we believe climate change is a big problem, and we think Britain should make sacrifices in order to be a climate leader and persuade the rest of the world and to follow us. But it will involve sacrifice, and make a moral argument for doing net zero, because there isn't an economic one. The truth is there is not an economic one, and that net zero will make us a lot poorer. So let's have some honesty first of all.
Yeah, I could do with a bit of honesty in my world. That is brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Dr. Lawrence Buckman, reading the wrong name here, Rupert Darwall, author of Green Tyranny.